Morning, members. Well, it's morning for me at least, probably evening for you guys. Either way, welcome to the latest video lesson or revision lesson, this time focusing on the key quotations in the Christmas Carol. So I've gone through the novella and I've selected what I believe to be the key quotations for each character, so you don't have to. Okay, right, let's crack on. It's just going to be a series of screens, one screen per character or maybe a couple, and we'll just go through the quotations and explain a little bit about what they mean. Okay, so Scrooge, so if you're tracking the development or the evolution of Scrooge, obviously you start at the beginning. So what was he like? He was a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone. So this is our first real description of Scrooge, which presents him in an unpleasant light. Tight-fisted hand at the grindstone just sounds like he'd be very, very unpleasant to work for. We know he allows Bob Cratchit a single candle flame, a single piece of coal in the depths of winter. He's hard and sharp as flint. Flint is a hard stone. Again, no warmth. This is a simile. Maybe it implies his ability to hurt others. Solitary as an oyster. Another simile. Solitary as an oyster. Isolated. His behaviour, the way he's acted, his attitude. He's got nobody. He's got a lot of money, but he's got nobody. He's not happy. He's miserable. One of the quotations that really comes back to haunt him when he says to the two charity workers who ask for a little contribution for the poor at Christmas time, he says, "Are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses?" Kind of reflecting his belief and maybe society's belief, certainly the wealthy in society's belief at the time, that being poor was a crime. And then perhaps his harshest response to being told of the plight of the city's poor, well, if they would rather die, they'd better do it and decrease the surplus population. Now this comes back to haunt him with specific regards to Tiny Tim. And he feels incredibly moved when he thinks that Tiny Tim is one of these poor that had better die to decrease the surplus population. It's not my business. Sums up his attitude. Society's problems are of no concern to him. He's a capitalist. He cares about himself and making as much money as he possibly can. He pays his taxes, so as far as he's concerned, he's doing what he needs to do to help society. Then we encounter his transformation. Obviously, he's had the visit of Marley's ghost and then the three spirits. And how have they affected him? I will honour Christmas in my heart. I will live in the past, the present and the future. I will not shut out the lessons that they teach. Hello, who's this? Yep, it's still Scrooge. And of course, remember, you link the character of Scrooge to Dickens' underlying message that if someone like Scrooge can change their attitude, the way they behave, then anybody can. So it reflects the transformation in his character and how he has learned his lessons from the three ghosts. I'll send it to Bob Cratchit. Hang on a minute. A single candle flame, really giving him a hard time for wanting to have Christmas Day off. And here he is, sending the largest turkey he can find to the Cratchit family. So this is the start of his promise to help the Cratchits and treat his office clerk with respect and kindness. And then his reformed attitude to charity. He finds the charity workers and he decides to give them a large amount of money. And they, "Sir, this is too much," they say. "Not a farthing less. A great many back payments are included in it." So a complete acknowledgement of his poor previous behaviour and his willingness to right the wrongs. "Therefore, I am about to raise your salary." Obviously to Bob Cratchit, who was thinking, he was fearful almost that he was going to get into trouble. Evidence of just how much he's changed. No more the miserly boss. Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all and became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city knew. So he got repetition of good there, just to reinforce the change in his character and the fact that it's going to be a permanent one. Obviously, there are other quotations you can go to for Scrooge, but some of these quotations you can link to themes as well and other characters. Marley and Marley's ghost. Now this is the warning to Scrooge. I wear the chains I forged in life. This is warning to Scrooge. Look, you reap what you sow. If you're good in life, your afterlife will be pleasant. If you're bad in life, yes, you guessed it, you'll spend eternity depending on how you lived your life on earth. He's got these chains, and they're made up of cash boxes, keys, padlocks, ledgers, deeds, and heavy purses wrought in steel. These items symbolise the things that Marley spent his life on, and Scrooge is currently spending his life on. They're all related to money and protecting his possessions. Scrooge felt the chilling influence of its death-cold eyes. So Scrooge is scared by the appearance of Marley's ghost, suggesting that Marley's message is serious and Scrooge needs to pay heed. My spirit never rode beyond the narrow limits of our money-changing hole. This reflects that he doesn't need to, or isn't capable of, venturing too far as a spirit. There is plenty of suffering and misery to be found nearby, that in death he is powerless to prevent. And not only is he powerless to prevent, he wants to, he can see the hardship everywhere. He can see the suffering everywhere, and he wants to help, but it's too late. He's just a spirit. He can't help. So he's saying to Scrooge, look, you can still help. You're not dead. You're alive. You can still affect change. You can still enhance the quality of people's lives. And then conveying Dickens' message that caring for others is the most important thing and not money and possessions. Mankind was my business. Fred, Scrooge's nephew. He can't understand why someone like Scrooge who is so obsessed by money and is very rich yet is still not happy. Otherwise, what's the point? What reason have you to be morose? You're rich enough. I've always thought of Christmas as a good time, a kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time. Here he expresses Dickens' views on Christmas. Now, juxtaposing Scrooge's own views, bar humbug, and by doing so appear far more attractive and logical, and in fact, by the end, then it's Scrooge that wants to be a part of Fred's experience of Christmas and Fred's life and family. Don't be angry, Uncle. Merry Christmas. And again, continuing this juxtaposition, despite his uncle's hostilities, he is resolutely positive. If you should happen, by any unlikely chance, to know a man more blessed in the laugh than Scrooge's nephew, all I can say is I should like to know him too. Further evidence of Fred's good nature and how he is perceived by others, and also, ultimately, how Scrooge aims to be perceived by others also. Scrooge's offences carry their own punishment. Who suffers? Himself. He proffers, or puts forward, that Scrooge is the biggest victim of the way he is, that he is utterly miserable and alone because of the way he behaves. Which is absolutely true. And compare that to how Scrooge is at the end. He's happy and excited and enthusiastic, enthused even by Christmas. The Cratchits. Now the Cratchits symbolise poor people and the poverty stricken in Victorian England. The Clark's fire was so very much smaller that it looked like only one coal. The miserly Scrooge, despite the biting cold, would not allow Bob to keep himself warm. There's another fellow, my clerk, with 15 shillings a week and a wife and family, talking about a Merry Christmas. I'll retire to Bedlam. Scrooge expressing disbelief that someone as poor as Bob could still be joyous at Christmas. So what's the message? Money doesn't buy you happiness. Love and warmth and happiness and friendship and people, family, they're the important things. Tiny Tim hoped the people saw him in the church because he was a cripple, and remember upon Christmas Day who made lame beggars walk and blind men see. It reflects the humility and optimism that Bob has instilled in his family. Again, comes as a real shock to Scrooge. Mrs. Cratchit made the gravy hissing hot. Master Peter mashed the potatoes with incredible vigour. Miss Belinda sweetened up the apple sauce. The family, united, are all enthusiastically even, coming together to prepare the Christmas dinner. Sounds so contrasting to Scrooge's cold, dark, isolated experience on Christmas Day. There never was such a goose cooked. Even though they're struggling, they're poor, they're wearing old clothes and they haven't got enough food, they're still grateful for what they have got. Bob's joy and gratitude for what he has is infectious. Eked out by applesauce and mashed potatoes. So this hints at their poverty as attempts were made to compensate for the lack of food. Eked out, so made to look better by applesauce and mashed potatoes. But then, are they moaning about this? God bless us, everyone. Express gratitude and good nature. Mrs. Cratchit, a little bit less gracious than her husband. Mr. Scrooge, I'd give him a piece of my mind. An odious, stingy, hard, unfeeling man. Bob's wife vents her anger at the way Scrooge treats her husband. That odious, stingy, hard, unfeeling man. That's called an asyndetic list. A-S-Y-N-D-E-T-I-C. An asyndetic list is a list that doesn't contain an and you'll notice that Scrooge is often depicted using this asyndetic list, as to are the children of ignorance and want. It kind of emphasizes or exaggerates the point. It's a list of synonyms that all have a negative connotation. Odious, stingy, hard, unfeeling man. But Bob refuses to be bitter, instead toasting his boss, the founder of the feast. For what little he's paid by Scrooge, it has paid for their food on the table this Christmas. Now, the ghost of Christmas past. Would you, Scrooge, so soon put out the light I give? Offers hope to Scrooge before he fully appreciates what's happening. So he takes him back. A solitary child, neglected by his friends, is left there still. Scrooge sobbed. A hint of what was to come, perhaps. To see Scrooge's extraordinary voice between laughing and crying and his excited face would have been a surprise to his business friends in the city, a reminder that Scrooge hasn't always been the way he is now. That once he could express emotion, including happiness, God forbid. When he was with Fezziwig, his old boss, Scrooge's heart and soul were in the scene. He remembered everything, enjoyed everything. It's looking back at how such a simple act of generosity from his old boss could instill such joy and gratitude into so many people. He had forgotten this. And he notes a small matter to make these folks so full of gratitude, forced understanding of why it is more important to focus on how you treat people than making money. And as a consequence, he says, I should like to be able to say a word or two to my clerk just now. That's all. So he's becoming reflective. He's having an impact. This trip down memory lane is having an impact on Scrooge as he's forced to reflect on how he treats others. Ghost of Christmas present. A jolly giant who bore a glowing torch with a cheery voice and a joyful air reflects how there is enough good to go round. To a poor one most, because it needs it most, states that the poor are in most need of this good cheer. Now looking at the Cratchits, I see a vacant seat. The child will die. Reflects that if things continue as they are, Tiny Tim will die. And this has a big impact on Scrooge. If he be like to die, he'd better do it and decrease the surplus population. Ouch, stinging retort from the ghost of Christmas present, using Scrooge's own words against him. Scrooge was the ogre of the family, and the mention of his name cast a dark shadow. Scrooge is a reminder to Scrooge of the way his actions impact upon others, in this case the Cratchits. And then the two children. They are man's. This boy is ignorance, this girl is want. Beware, for I see that written, which is doom. A warning that unless things change, the future will be bleak, reflecting Dickens' belief that education is key to people fighting their way out of poverty. And include a bit of context here about Dickens' schools. The ghost of Christmas future. It was shrouded in a deep black garment which concealed its head, its face, its form, and left nothing visible except one outstretched hand. So deliberately presented to reflect the Grim Reaper. The Grim Reaper is obviously death. The ghost of the future. I fear you more than any spectre I have seen. Implying that Scrooge is aware of the way he's led his life and that it's wrong and that he needs to change. But as I know your purpose is to do me good, I am prepared to bear you company with a thankful heart. Acknowledging that his life up to now can only have guaranteed him a bleak future, but is resolute to learn any lessons he can from this spirit. I don't mind going to the funeral if a lunch is provided. This is Scrooge's business associates revealing how little he meant to them. They would only go to his funeral if there was a lunch provided. Nobody would attend his funeral. Maybe his nephew Fred. It would be bad fortune to find so merciless a creditor. We may sleep tonight with light hearts, Caroline. This is the relief felt by people who were in debt to Scrooge, emphasising his lack of compassion and the fear he caused in others, that his death makes them sleep well for the first time in probably years. I am sure we shall none of us forget Tiny Tim. Scrooge heartbroken at the news of Tiny Tim's death. A churchyard, overrun by weeds, the growth of vegetation's death not life, a worthy place. This is the apt resting place for someone nobody cared about. Okay, so that's the last page. Again, there's an awful lot of quotations there, so do pause, take notes, don't write them all down. Some observations, see which quotations you can link to various other characters or themes. And best of luck with that then. Okay, cheerio, bye.